Oh, okay, we have the minister here. Hi, and hello and welcome. If you're tuning in now or joining us in the room, my name is Clotilde Goujard. I'm a senior tech reporter with Politico, and we will now be discussing disinformation in this panel with Vice President Vera Jourova with us today.
Hello, good afternoon.
And with Minister for EU Affairs, French Minister for EU Affairs, Jean-Noël Barrot. Hi, Mr. Barrot.
Hi.
2024 is set to be a crucial year for elections around the world, and cybersecurity officials and disinformation experts have warned about the spread of falsehoods such as misinformation, but also coordinated disinformation campaigns. We've also seen generative AI tools that can create content like deepfakes, and these tools are posing new risks that were previously not known. We're now 2 months before the European elections on June 6 to 9. And so it's a particularly timely moment to be discussing these issues. Just a brief reminder, you can talk about this panel on X or your favorite social media network with the hashtag PoliticoTechAI. Vice President, I'll start with you. You've embarked in the last month on what you called your democracy tour. You were in Athens yesterday. Last week you were in Portugal and Riga. What did you hear from officials on the ground, and how prepared are national authorities to counter misinformation, so falsehoods, misleading claims, as well as potential foreign disinformation?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Sorry for being late. What I hear, well, I am a flying agent now, and I am coming to the member states with 2 questions. Are you sure you are sufficiently prepared against the cyber attacks, foreign interference, and AI new thing, which is especially deepfake? And the second question, how can I help? Because especially due to our long-lasting cooperation with the big tech, the big tech managers confirmed to me many times that they would be ready to react in case some member states want to have closer link. It's always an answer of the platforms when I tell them you have to do more in all the member states and all the 24 languages. I hear from the platforms, yes, we would appreciate to have a closer link to those who will maybe help us to understand the sensitivities and discover the hidden power in some kind of disinformation campaigns. So these are my questions there, and what I hear, different answers. Either we do not underestimate it, we are used to it, especially the cyber attacks and foreign propaganda, especially from Russia. This is obviously what I heard in Finland or Baltic Sea countries. In other countries, I heard that this kind of threat does not feel that strong in the country. It was the case of Portugal. So different answers, but I think that if we underestimate the preparations for the elections in 1 or 2 member states, we will see problems for the whole EU.
I'm turning to you, Minister Barrot, now. France has been singled out as a regular target of foreign interference, and Paris is also going to host the Olympics over the summer. So I can imagine this must be a complicated time potentially for you. So what have you put in place at a national level to detect and also counter potential foreign meddling?
Thanks for this question, and I also want to thank the Vice President Jourova for all the actions she has been taking these recent months to secure the electoral processes across the EU. What we are seeing here in Paris is that we are being overwhelmed with propaganda and disinformation, and that this cannot be overstated. We are seeing traditional media websites being diverted, official ministry websites being diverted, fake news websites being created, fake accounts on social networks being created to amplify disinformation campaign. In the past 6 weeks, there has not been 1 week without a coordinated disinformation campaign affecting France. Why? For two main reasons. The first reason is obviously the vocal support of France and other European member states to the Ukraine in the context of the aggression war of Russia on Ukraine. And the second reason is the lowering of the barrier to entry for disinformation due in particular to the emergence of generative AI technology. So in the face of such a situation, what we need is a democratic shield. And a democratic shield rests on three pillars. The first pillar is detection, the second pillar is treatment, and the third pillar is antibodies, and we are working on all three pillars at the national level, as well as in close coordination with Vice President Jourova's services. The first pillar is detection. Of course, the first actor that can detect such disinformation campaigns is the free press and the independent media. And thanks to the Commission and the Parliament and the Council, will soon have a framework for the freedom of media throughout the EU. But media alone is not enough, and we need special expertise and services. This is what we have created in France 3 years ago with a service called Viginum that the President Macron wanted to create, and that is dedicated to the detection and attribution of foreign interference and misinformation or manipulation of information campaign. So that's for detection, and I think we need more tools like Viginum at the European level. The second pillar is treatment, and we now have, with the Digital Services Act, great powers in the hands of the Commission to put pressure on platforms to remove contents that have been detected as related to misinformation campaigns and attributed to foreign interference. Pressure on those platforms to also analyze and correct the systemic risk that their algorithms trigger on public discourse. This is Article 34, 35, and 36 of the Digital Service Act. And so the platform should be well aware that if they were to contribute through their service to the propagation of fake news during the electoral process, in particular in the days before the election, like this happened in Slovakia last September, then they could be held responsible for distorting a democratic process in the EU. That's the second pillar, treatment, that has to go through the responsibility of a social platform. And the third pillar is antibodies, which means the digital literacy of the citizens of Europe. We need to help them and train them in order to distinguish between two pieces of information, what is misinformation and foreign interference, from what is legitimate information. And this means coordinated efforts at the national and European level so that we are not at the citizen level contaminated by such interference and manipulation, and that we do not contaminate our fellow citizens.
Vice President Jourova, what's your reaction when you hear this Minister Barrot say that France is overwhelmed by disinformation operations ahead of the EU elections? Is this something else you heard before from your visits?
Yes. Also, it's shown in the data that France belongs to the countries where it's for Russia worth investing, because behind all those campaigns is a big money Russia has to invest to brainwash Europeans. And France is one of the countries where we see a lot of well-targeted campaigns So I'm very glad that the minister shows that they are not in Paris underestimating that, and we discussed at length about their plans how to counter this worrying situation. And I want to thank him for the analysis of those three things to be done. I am looking at it when I am traveling to the countries from a little bit different angle, because these three things which the minister mentioned have to be done by many different bodies. First of all, the state. Wherever I hear that in some member state they designated the high-level envoy for the fight against disinformation, I use inside of myself some bad language as a reaction to it, because such an envoy will be just sacrificed because he or she cannot do much. It is connected with the last thing, the antibodies. Well, we know which topics, which sectors are traditionally attacked. Disinformation and campaign very rarely has no flavor, no taste character. Yeah, it's, for instance, the disinformation that the elections will be manipulated. This is something which is out of the sectors. But all the others, security, defense, of course, Ukraine, minorities, Green Deal, migration, we know what the attacks will be about. So here comes my poor special envoy designated by a government. Well, he cannot do anything about that. It has to be permanent. Part of the work of the communicators at different authorities to take care of their facts. And unless we understand that we have to change the way we communicate and pre-bunk the campaigns, we will be always defensive and we will never win this. I even speak with the technologists whether it's possible, on the basis of the analysis of the past disinformation campaigns, whether it's possible to deploy AI to predict the campaigns, the topics and the timing. Up to now, I heard from them, this is a good idea, and perhaps we should look into this. And then for the different sectors, it would be big help to understand what will come next month, for instance. Does it sound like science fiction? Many things, dear ladies and gentlemen, we live through used to sound like science fiction still 2 years ago, and we are in it. But Clotilde, you are patient, so I will continue. Maybe two more things. Yeah. When I come to the countries, I always meet the people from the ministries, ministers or some other people. The more you go to the east of Europe, the more this is under the remit of the ministries of defense. Yeah? In most of the member states, it's the core ministry is the Home Affairs Ministry. In most of the countries, it's also handled by Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's similar in the Commission. Pepe Borrell has the foreign interference, and I have the troubles we have in the EU. In the member states, this is partly covered by the ministries of culture, I mean the media part, or protection or strengthening media part, and also ministries of digitalization. So when in the situation when everything is doing a little bit of it and nobody coordinates that, you cannot see the proper synergy. So that's one message I am bringing to the member states. Please put together and do coordination. The second kind of meetings I have is with the media organizations, because the Media Freedom Act is upcoming. The third is the roundtable with the enforcers of Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, Political Ads Regulation, future AI Act people. Future, I mean, when the AI Act will come into force. And one more thing, the Media Freedom Act, I think. But for us, it's important, once we have the legislation in place, which also Minister Barrow spoke about, the Digital Services Act especially, we need to see this properly enforced. And when I was in Latvia, they told me, yes, we have troubles with too much of disinformation appearing in Meta. I think YouTube, TikTok is becoming a real problem due to the magnitude of appearance of disinformation attacking the young brains. But in Latvia, they tell you, what shall we do with Telegram? And I'm telling them, for Telegram, which is not among those big platforms where the Commission can act, this is for you, for your national enforcer to go after that. Yes, so I think that this is a hard work now to protect elections and electoral processes. It's not business as usual. I happily was campaigning 10 years ago last time, 11 years ago. So there was a billboard of Jourova. I was in the streets of my region distributing pancakes, or how would you call it? Something very sweet and unhealthy, little pieces of salami. I was speaking to the real people in real time, and there was some media coverage. Compare it today with today's situation, yeah? Through how many ways the voters can be misled, manipulated, totally brainwashed. We simply have to change the way we do these things.
Minister Barrot, we've spoken a little bit about the Digital Services Act, the DSA, which was finalized, by the way, under your presidency of the Council. But under the DSA, a lot of the power falls in the hands of the European Commission for the very large online platforms, and to some extent to the Irish watchdogs. How do you think so far the DSA has been applied to limit the harms from misinformation and disinformation ahead of the elections?
So the DSA indeed provides the Commission with extended powers for the regulation of the largest social media platforms as well as marketplaces. This is good news because it means that from now on, irrespective of the place where your establishment is, you will be subject to the control of the Commission. Now, of course, the Commission, to implement the Digital Services Act, is going to rely on the digital service coordinators in each of the member states that are going to inform the Commission on any breach that they find or that they observe in the behavior of such platforms. Now, of course, the Digital Services Act just came into force on February 17th of this year. So it's in the process of being implemented, but I'm pretty sure that the largest players, those that are regulated by the Commission, for whom the DSA came into force a bit earlier, on August 25th of last year, have already put in place a certain number of safeguards in order for them not to be the instruments of, for instance, Russian propaganda in democratic processes in the EU. In fact, Commissioner Jourova published recently a set of guidelines that are, of course, voluntary, but that basically explicit the expectations that the Commission has regarding the behavior of social media platform during the political campaign, the electoral process, such that they take into account the emergence of generative AI tools used for the purpose of those political campaigns. So building up on the DSA, the Commission published those guidelines that have been signed by a number of these social media platforms. They also published a charter that the main political parties in the EU also signed, that is not directly related to the DSA, but directed or related to the use of AI during political campaigns. So what I'm trying to say here is that above and beyond the power granted to the Commission through the Digital Services Act adopted under the French presidency of the Council, there is a clear movement towards more responsibility for the platforms under the watch of the EU Commission. Now, of course, what I'm expecting is that a scenario like the one we saw in Slovakia last September, where a fake recording of one of the two major candidates in the national election was propagated during the silent period, meaning during the 48 hours before the election, which prevented the candidate to respond to respond effectively to the propagation of this fake recording, where he was heard as saying that he would manipulate the vote. What we need is, of course, for such a scenario never to happen again in the EU, and especially not for European elections. Because even if, as Commissioner Jourova was hinting at earlier on, even if there were incidents in some member states, even if there was no major sort of incident regarding the election, even minor incidents can cast doubt on the legitimacy of the European election. And this would be extremely concerning, because democracy, which is what we're attached to in Europe, has one way to regenerate, which is the election. And so if a doubt is cast on the legitimacy of the election, then a doubt is cast on the legitimacy of democracy itself. And so I expect the platforms to do whatever it takes to prevent any such event to happen on the 6th to 9th June of this year, and the Commission to maintain the pressure on these platforms to get them to take all necessary action until the elections.
Maintaining the pressure on the, oh, can you hear me? Yep, maintaining the pressure on the very large online platforms under the DSA. What's your reaction? Any upcoming investigations? Anything to tell us about what we can expect in terms of making sure they do abide by these obligations ahead of the elections?
There are two ongoing investigations now. One in case of X, which was a probable candidate anyway, because we already saw a very big reluctance of Twitter to address the issues not only of disinformation but also illegal content. So it's Twitter now. It's TikTok for the lack of protection of children. By the way, I predict this to be the biggest issue in the next future or close future. You know, I have some history in the Commission. The first 5 years were about the protection of privacy. Now we deal with the issues connected with security. And I think that the next 5 years will be a lot about the protection of mental health, especially the children. But coming back to your question, which I forgot what it was.
How are you maintaining the pressure?
Yeah.
Can we expect any new investigations?
No, I don't know. And even if I would know, I would not tell you.
Still worth trying.
But I want to say that the enforcement line is absolutely crucial, that we have in the Commission sufficient number of experts, the people who understand what they see when they look into the algorithms and these technological things. At the same time, I think it's very important that we continue this parallel line of a dialogue, which is mainly my job, because Thierry Breton is the head of the enforcers. My job is to continue the dialogue about the nuances, about the extra efforts I told you about my pressure on the technologists to invent AI machine to predict the disinformation. These are these kinds of things which I want them to do, always being inspired also by the discussions with the big tech managers and technologists. It's always interesting to listen to what they indicate the technology could do for the benefit of people. I think it's one of our problems that we have some kind of technological paranoia that which doesn't enable us to look more at the positive things which might be achieved through the technologies.
Vice President, speaking about Russian disinformation incidents happening at the moment, your country, the Czech Republic, sanctioned a few weeks ago a Russian operation allegedly paying people inside the European Parliament, that's what they say, and who were spreading propaganda through a website called Voice of Europe and then through social media. The website, as of this morning, was back running. It's still being shared on X and Telegram. What can be done about such operations that were flagged by one specific countries and yet are still going around?
I will give you a rather technical answer. Yeah? It's in the competence of the member states to react on the appearance of such channels. We saw several TV channels prohibited in Baltic Sea countries already before the full-scale invasion. Now we see the Voice of Europe as a obviously problematic channel being established by Kremlin to spread Kremlin propaganda. And in this case, either this maybe should appear on the national sanctions list, or it could appear on the European sanctions list, and then it's again in the hands of the member states to enforce the rule that once some channel of information is being sanctioned, this channel has to stop operating. Not the journalists, but the channel.
Would you support European sanctions against this specific operation and the two individuals behind it as well?
I am not a big fan of prohibiting any media, but in case of the media established by Kremlin or owned by the sanctioned people or entities, we have no other choice. So we always have to do a proper analysis whether the channel fulfills these very high benchmark and high criteria for sanctioning, and we have to stop being naive, because we indeed are in the information war. At the same time, what I see a new phenomenon that we have some kind of tendency to refer to disinformation and Kremlin as if these are the main problems we have. It's a huge problem. Mr. Putin wants to roll out the red carpet for his friends, and he has a lot of friends in political ranks in the EU. And this is dangerous. That's why we do all the things which also Minister Barrot mentioned. But at the same time, when I hear that everything is now disinformation, even the uncomfortable opinions of the political opponents, I'm really nervous about that. Because we should work stubbornly with a clear definition of what kind of disinformation needs addressing. It's a misinformation produced in the coordinated manner with the intention to do harm to the security or democratic process. So we have the definition, so please not throw to this basket everything, because still I have to say that the freedom of expression and freedom of opinion is our biggest value.
Minister Barrot, going back to this specific Czech disinformation operation and this action that came from one single European country, it's making me wonder, how are you coordinating beyond your French borders with other EU countries?
So first, let me say on the previous discussion that Of course, the freedom of expression is a treasury, a European treasury, and we need to protect it at all costs. But the question is not to differentiate what is truth from lie. What the question is to identify voluntary, coordinated attempts at interfering with democratic processes in Europe. That's very different, and there are tools, techniques, and expertise to establish or to attribute such information manipulation campaigns. And so there is no sort of reason to pardon the authors or the actors of such campaigns. And in my view, they should be subject to European sanction regimes. Because this is the only way we can protect what is dearest to us, which is democracy. Then, in terms of coordination at the member states level, Stéphane Séjourné, Minister of Europe and Foreign Affairs in France, along with his German and Polish counterparts, unveiled on February 12th of this year another sort of misinformation and disinformation campaign named Portal Combat, attributed to Russian actors or proxies. And the three of them announced a sort of coordination mechanism in the case where either of these countries finds out that a cross-border campaign is going on. A similar type of coordination has happened in the Czech campaign that was affecting also other countries throughout the EU. So what we need going forward is probably more coordination, but also more expertise, because what I see from our 3-year experience working with French service Viginum is that detecting and attributing such campaigns relies on a very specific pool of expertise that bring together data scientists along with political specialists and anthropologists that bring their skills together to make sure that indeed they are not judging as to whether a piece of information is true or false, but whether they are really identifying what comes from a deliberate intention to interfere with national affairs, European affairs, and democratic process. So more coordination across the member states, but also a pooling of resources at the European level to be especially able to support some of the sort of smaller member states that do not have established pools of expertise so far, and that can therefore rely on this pool or European pool of expertise in order to find support whenever need be.
Vice President, my last question, we hear from disinformation experts a lot about foreign interference, but a lot of misinformation also comes from politicians themselves and political parties. Minister Barrot mentioned this code of conduct that you signed, or you had European political party signs for ethical campaigning. One of the measures was a commitment not to spread or produce unlabeled deepfakes around others' commitments. And all of them signed it, including the far-right ID, for example, as well as lots of others. Do you actually believe that they will respect this code?
I'd like to say, hope never dies. All the European political parties, including the far-right, signed this commitment. Indeed, we will refrain from using disinformation, deepfakes, and manipulative techniques. The question is whether I do believe. I do. However, I think that there will be gaps at the level of the national political parties, who I did not address directly, not to interfere. You know, I have to be careful. Brussels dictatorship is sometimes mentioned in some member states. But I asked the European political parties to ask their affiliated parties to do the same thing. It means to run decent, honest and transparent campaign. When we were signing it, I said that in September or October, we will see whether it pays off to play fair. Because I would like to do an analysis of the electoral campaigns in all the member states. We will start analyzing it from day one after the elections because time is short. And I would like to do a solid analysis looking back because I think that it will be important set of information for the future organizers of any other elections. I think that we need to start taking lessons and to work with reliable data. So this is the plan.
Thank you, Vice President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Barrot, for joining us today online. Thanks to all of you who stayed here to listen about disinformation and misinformation. And now Aoife White, our tech and competition editor, will come on stage with a few takeaways from this morning of panels and different talks. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for a very insightful morning at Politico's Tech and AI Summit. I'd like to thank our fabulous speakers and the wonderful journalists for giving us so much food for thought. We've had a very busy morning. We've been writing stories. If you look at your phone, you will see many of the alerts that we have written, because we have found many things that we've heard very interesting, and I hope you have too. I think just the last discussion just there on the importance of fair elections and the misinformation and the issues that we face there. We're only weeks away from the European election. Even there was I enjoyed some of the comments we had this morning from Mrs. Vestager talking about her phone and putting her phone down, something that her children have lectured her about and something my children lecture me about. I'd like to thank our partners for making this summit possible, our leading partners, Amazon and Microsoft, and our presenting partners, Google. Now, of course, we've got lunch for you now upstairs in the main networking space, but be aware that this room will be closed. So please take your bags and your personal effects with you during that time, and then come back for this afternoon. We'll be focusing mostly on artificial intelligence from several different angles, and we'll resume at 2:30 p.m. I've been Aoife White, Politico's Technology and Competition Editor. See you this afternoon.
We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
And looking ahead to what is next.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?